poor single mom fed a homeless man. Every day, every night after her shift, she paid for an extra meal and carried it outside to a man everyone else ignored. For 5 years, she fed him without asking his name or story, even as people laughed and her money ran thin. Then, one afternoon, men in suits walked into the diner asking for her, and what they revealed about the man she fed changed everything. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you better stories. Now, let's begin. The first sound Mariah Cole heard each morning was not her alarm. It was the slow, uneven breathing of her son on the mattress beside her bed. That sound told her everything she needed to know. He was still asleep. She had a few quiet minutes to herself. She rose carefully, in easing her feet onto the floor so the boards would not creak. The room was small, already warm, the fan turning more out of habit than effect. She washed her face in the sink, tied her hair back, and checked the time. Another shift. Another day of counting dollars before they slipped through her fingers. By the time the diner doors opened, the street was already alive. Engines idled. People rushed past without looking up. Inside, Mariah moved on instinct. Coffee poured, plates stacked, orders scribbled and forgotten. Her body knew the rhythm even when her mind felt heavy. She noticed him during her first month there. He sat outside near the curb, always in the same spot. Not close enough to bother customers. Not far enough to disappear. His clothes were worn but clean. He never held out his hand. And he just sat and watched the street like he belonged to it. One evening, after a long shift, Mariah wrapped an untouched meal and carried it outside. She placed it near him and stepped back. "You do not have to," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, already turning away. That was all. After that, it became routine. Every evening, one plate, one bottle of water, paid for with her tips. Sometimes someone inside noticed. "You are feeding him again?" a voice asked once, half amused. "He has to eat," Mariah said, wiping her hands on her apron. Another warned her she was throwing money away. Someone laughed and said, kindness did not cover rent. Mariah did not argue. She finished her shift and went home. At night, she stretched meals so her son could eat twice. She told him stories while counting bills at the table. When money ran thin, she skipped lunch. Outside the diner, the man still ate every day. Weeks passed into months. Isaiah sometimes waited with her near the door. He waved shyly when the man looked over. The man always straightened his back when the boy was near, like he wanted to be seen properly. Mariah never asked his name, never asked why he was there. She believed questions turned kindness into a transaction. What she did not notice was how closely he watched her son, or how his hands trembled after the boy left, or how long he stayed seated after finishing the meal, as if the moment mattered more than the food. Rainy evenings came. Mariah shielded the plate under her jacket so it stayed warm. Cold nights followed. She stood longer, making sure he had enough. People passed and whispered. Some shook their heads. Some did not see her at all. Night after night, she placed the food down and walked back inside before gratitude could weigh too much. She did not know she was being measured. She only knew she would return the next day. And she did. Time did not announce itself when it passed. It settled in quietly, the way dust gathered on shelves. One season slid into another, and before Mariah realized it, years had folded into routine. The man outside became part of the diner's landscape. New waitresses came and went. Managers changed. Menus were updated. He stayed. Always in the same place. Always waiting. People stopped asking about him because his presence no longer felt unusual. Mariah's life narrowed to small concerns, school shoes that wore out too quickly, a landlord who reminded her about rent days before it was due, a bus that broke down when she could least afford to be late. She learned to solve problems without complaint. That habit showed in her shoulders, in the way she stood even when she was tired. Every evening followed the same path. Clock out. Wash hands. Wrap the plate. Walk outside. Sometimes the man spoke more than a sentence. Not stories, just remarks that hovered between them. "He is growing fast," he said once, nodding toward Isaiah. "He eats a lot," Mariah replied, smiling despite herself. That was enough. Isaiah began doing homework at a corner table near the window. He liked watching the street. When Mariah stepped outside with the food, he watched her through the glass, tracing shapes on the table with his finger. The man noticed that too. His eyes followed the boy more often than the traffic. On birthdays, Mariah bought small cakes. Candles flickered in the diner after closing hours. Isaiah made wishes he never said aloud. The man outside always stood when they passed him on the way home, as if marking the day in his own quiet way. Some nights, Mariah lingered longer than usual. She adjusted the napkin, asked if the food was warm enough. "You do not need to worry about me," he said once. "I worry anyway," she answered, then felt surprised she had said it. Her co-workers still whispered from time to time. One said she had a soft heart that would harden when life taught her better. Another joked that the man was probably lying about everything. Mariah listened without reacting. She had learned that defending kindness only made people louder. 5 years passed like that. Then, one evening, the chair was empty. Mariah paused at the door, a plate in her hands. She looked down the street. She waited longer than usual before placing the food on the curb. It stayed untouched. The next day, he was still gone. She felt a strange absence settle in her chest, heavier than she expected. She told herself people moved on. People disappeared all the time. That was the city. On the third day, men in dark suits stepped into the diner during lunch rush. Their shoes were polished. Their eyes searched the room. They asked for Mariah. She wiped her hands on her apron, confused, and stepped forward. One of them said they needed to speak with her privately. Customers stared. Someone whispered her name. As she followed them out, she glanced toward the curb. The space was still empty. Something had shifted. She felt it before she understood it. The car ride felt longer than it should have. The traffic moved normally, yet Mariah watched the buildings pass as if she were being carried somewhere outside her own life. No one spoke. The men in the front seat focused on the road. The one beside her held a folder on his lap, his fingers resting carefully on its edge. They stopped in front of a quiet office building. Glass doors, neutral walls, the kind of place where voices stayed low. Inside, she was offered a chair. Water was placed in front of her. She did not touch it. "We are sorry for your loss," one of them said. She frowned. "I do not understand." The folder opened. They told her the man she had fed had passed away the previous morning. Natural causes. Peaceful, they said, as if that detail might soften something. Mariah felt the room tilt slightly. She focused on the grain of the table to steady herself. And she asked where he was buried. The question came out before she thought about it. They exchanged a glance, then continued. The man, they explained, had not been homeless in the way most people understood. He had lived that way by choice, for years. They spoke carefully, measuring every sentence. He had once been powerful. His name had carried weight in rooms Mariah had never seen. He owned companies, properties, accounts that stretched beyond numbers she could imagine. Mariah shook her head. "You are mistaken." They slid documents across the table. Names, signatures, dates, photographs taken long before the diner existed. Then came the part that made her hands go cold. He had no living relatives, they said, no spouse, no children recognized by law. He had named her as next of kin. The words landed without meaning at first. She waited for the correction that did not come. They placed an envelope in front of her. Thick paper. Her name written in careful handwriting she recognized immediately. "It is addressed to you," one of them said. Mariah did not open it right away. She pressed her thumb along the edge, feeling the texture. Memories surfaced instead. The way he always stood when she approached. How he waited until she walked away before eating. The way he looked at Isaiah as if the boy mattered more than the meal. "Why me?" she asked quietly. One of them answered, "He was very specific." The room felt too quiet. Outside, someone laughed on the street. Life continued without noticing the moment Mariah's understanding began to crack. She finally opened the letter. The first line made her chest tighten. When he wrote that he had made terrible choices when money was the only thing he listened to, that he had ignored people who loved him, that by the time he realized what he had lost, there was nothing left to repair. He wrote about walking away from everything he owned, about wanting to disappear before regret finished him, about choosing the curb outside the diner because it was a place where no one expected anything from him. He wrote about her, about how she never asked questions, how she never tried to fix him, how she placed the food down like it was normal, like he belonged. Mariah's vision blurred. She lowered the paper, breathing slowly, aware that the men across from her were watching her closely. There was more, much more, and she was not ready for it. The letter did not rush. It unfolded its truth slowly, as if the writer knew she would need space to breathe between lines. He explained that long before the diner, before the curb and the worn jacket, there had been a family. A wife who waited for him at night. A son who watched the door, hoping his father would come home before sleep won. Money always pulled harder. Meetings replaced dinners. Apologies came late, then stopped coming at all. When his wife fell ill, he convinced himself there would be time later. Later never arrived. She died while he was closing a deal that made headlines the next day. His son never forgave him for that. The silence between them became permanent. Years passed without contact. Then, by chance and by guilt, he began searching. What he found broke what remained of him. His son had died in a car accident years earlier. No inheritance, no reconciliation, only records, addresses, a woman working as a waitress, a child with familiar eyes. He wrote that he followed quietly at first. He stood across the street some evenings. He watched Mariah leave work exhausted and still stopped to check on her son. And he learned that Isaiah was his grandson without ever speaking a word. The weight of it pushed him to the street. He gave up his name, his money, his comforts, not as punishment, but as escape. He wanted to know what remained of him when there was nothing to offer. He wanted to see how the world treated a man who could give nothing back. Most people walked past. Mariah did not. He wrote about the first meal she placed beside him, how she did it without hesitation, without pity, how she never tried to ask for his story as payment for her kindness. He admitted he ran a background check on her after the first year, not out of suspicion, but disbelief. He wanted to understand how someone with so little could still give consistently. The report confirmed what he already felt. She was alone, struggling, still choosing to help. And he wrote that watching her raise Isaiah healed something he thought was dead. That hearing the boy laugh nearby gave him peace he had never found in boardrooms or estates. Near the end, his writing grew unsteady. Doctors had told him the truth weeks earlier. His body was failing. There would be no recovery. He chose not to tell her. He did not want gratitude to replace honesty. He did not want his final days changed by revelation. He wrote that the years on the street were the only years he felt free. He ended with regret. Not for the money. For the time he wasted before understanding what mattered. Mariah lowered the letter. Her hands shook. She pressed them together to stop it. One of the men spoke carefully. "There is more regarding the estate." She nodded without lifting her head. The truth had already arrived, and everything else felt distant. She understood now why he had watched her son so closely, why his voice softened when Isaiah spoke, why he stayed seated long after finishing his meals. She had fed a stranger. She had also given a broken man his final peace. The days after the funeral moved differently, as if time had lost its usual pace. Mariah returned to work because routine felt safer than thought. The diner smelled the same. The floor still needed mopping. Orders still piled up. Yet every time she glanced toward the curb, the space felt wrong, like a chair left empty in a familiar room. Word spread quickly. People who once laughed now watched her closely. Some spoke softer. Others acted as if kindness had suddenly become impressive now that it carried proof. Mariah noticed the change and said nothing. When the estate settled, but her life shifted overnight. Accounts were transferred, papers signed. Numbers appeared that did not feel real. Strangers asked what she planned to do next. She took her time answering. Isaiah asked why people were suddenly calling the house. She told him the truth in pieces, that the man had trusted her. That trust mattered more than money. The boy listened quietly, then asked if the man was lonely at the end. Mariah said no. She believed that. Requests followed. Old co-workers, distant relatives, people with stories about needing help. Mariah declined most of them, not out of anger, but clarity. She understood now how easily money confused intention. Instead, she focused on what had been given to her freely. She started small. Meals, shelters, places where questions were not required to earn dignity, so she named the organization after the man who never asked to be known. Not to honor wealth, but to remember the choice he made at the end. On opening day, she stood outside one of the centers and watched people eat quietly. No speeches, no cameras, just food placed gently on tables. Someone beside her said, "You did not have to do all this." "I know," she replied. That answer felt familiar. Mariah never stopped working entirely. She liked staying grounded. She still rode the bus some mornings, still packed lunches, still taught her son to look people in the eye. Sometimes, when evening light hit the street just right, she imagined a man standing nearby, hands folded, watching the world with calm acceptance. She had fed a stranger without knowing who he was. In return, she learned who she had always been, and she chose to remain that person. If this story reminded you that small choices can change lives in ways we never see, take a moment to reflect on how you treat people when nothing is expected back. Share this story with someone who needs that reminder, and subscribe for more real stories of quiet kindness, hidden truth, and the power of doing what is right even when no one is watching.